Okay, so we're here to present the Istio Product Security Working Group, what it is and why it's important. We'll kind of go through some of the information about how the group was created, what the process is for handling vulnerabilities, and the kind of things we look for. Okay, so what is the Product Security Working Group? The Product Security Working Group was created with the goal of resolving, identifying, and preventing vulnerabilities in Istio. We do this by addressing vulnerability disclosure reports and transparently informing our community and users. We also provide new security guidelines for Istio's development and track the security threats of Istio as a product, dependencies, add-ons, anti-patterns, trying to make it the most secure product we can. So a brief history. The Product Security Working Group isn't the first product security group within Istio. Before that, we had the Product Security Committee. This was a smaller group of people. It was more focused on solving individual vulnerabilities and didn't really have a formal process in place. The Product Security Working Group was created in March of 2020 to help enable this. Who's on the group? We have 15 people on the Product Security Working Group right now. 2 of them are members of the Technical Oversight Committee, Josh Blatt and Niraj Badar. These are made up of a variety of different companies, including AspenMesh, Google, IBM, Invitae, and Red Hat. So we have 2 security groups in Istio, and you might be a little confused on what the goals of each are. The Product Security Work Group is focused more on the security of Istio itself, fixing vulnerabilities, preventing issues before they become vulnerabilities, that sort of thing. Really, how can we keep Istio as a product secure? The security work group is more focused on the AAA features of Istio, features that you might want to use in your environment to secure your applications that Istio is protecting. So yeah, what features in Istio can be used to secure environments? And off to you, Jacob.
So yeah, thank you, Brian. So a common concern that is raised is that when a vulnerability report is reported to the group, how do we score it as a group? And so at first we receive this report, and part of this assessment is working together as a group to triage this and say, ask very basic questions. Can we reproduce it? How easy is it to exploit? Is the control plane exploitable? Is the data plane, exploitable? And, a common framework that is typically used with, that is kind of the de facto industry standard is CVSS. And this is an open framework, and it communicates the characteristics along with severity for software vulnerabilities. This is done across numerous vectors, including confidentiality, availability, integrity, and the ease of exploitation. So, kind of the one thing that I do want to make clear is that CVSS, it's not a science. It's a formula. It's a heuristic, and so even sometimes within the group, we will dissent on some of these vectors, if it's easy or not to exploit, or how it can be exploited. But as an end user, the important thing for you is that as the score goes up, the severity of it goes up, as well as in most likelihood, how easy it is to exploit, or what it would mean for your environment. So after we assign a vulnerability report with a score, these are some of the ways that we work together as a group and with the larger community to fix these issues. If we score it less than a 6, it is typically fixed in public, and it's generally of low concern to the user. This may be just written as a bug. It's nobody's really vulnerable. You shouldn't be too concerned. If it's between a 6 and a 7, this is where it's a gray area. And so, this is more of a case-by-case basis, within the group. Sometimes we will issue a CVE patch for this. Sometimes we'll just, fix it as a GitHub issue. But, the key component is that when this is disclosed, if it is privately disclosed, please take a look at the bulletin and see if it affects you and your environment. And then finally, if we score something greater than a 7, then this will trigger our incident command system, which Brian will talk about shortly here. But we will actually fix this in private. We won't disclose anything publicly. We'll align embargoes with third parties or the reporter and whatnot. And then when we do publish it, we strongly recommend that everybody please evaluate the security bulletin, but upgrade as soon as possible. And then kind of like something that Brian and I were talking about is that alpha features, while they are not technically supported, are evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So if we get a report on an alpha feature, we will tend to score it the same way. But if you were to look at the features stages page on the Istio.io website, there's limited support for alpha features. So, but we are doing our best, to try to keep Istio secure. So, all right. So, let's take a look back at 2020. So in 2020, the product security group issued 11 security bulletins. And in those 11 security bulletins, we had 17 CVEs. If we further break that down by score, we see 3 of them were less than 6. Between 6 and 7, we had 2, and we actually had 11 that were above 7. So a key part of this talk is to make sure that people are aware of this security page and actually track how they actually are keeping their service mesh environments secure. Another thing to note is that only supported releases of Istio actually receive security patches. And as of today, that is only Istio 1.8 and Istio 1.9. So, please upgrade or have plans to upgrade soon if you are on older versions. And again, this is actually the security bulletins page on our website. Here we disclose the number. If we have a MITRE CVE, we will link to there, as well as the score and affected versions. The one thing, though, that I do want to call out on this page is that we don't always say all releases prior to X, and sometimes even we do. Please don't assume that just because something isn't listed that you may or may not be affected. Only the currently supported releases get vulnerabilities fixed, at the time of publication. And so if you were to look at, some of the older reports, there may be something that does affect a version of, say, Istio 1.5, but isn't listed on this page. We will be making updates to this page, to try to be, a little bit more transparent in this. But again, it does require, a lot of work in order for us to do those assessments. So we can't stress enough, the need for using a supported version of Istio, and those being, 1.8 and 1.9. So with that, I'll give it back to Brian.
Thank you, Jacob. So now that Jacob's kind of described some of the vulnerabilities that we saw over the course of this year, I wanted to introduce you to the process that we follow when a vulnerability is reported to us. The major goal of this is to respond to all vulnerability reports within 30 days. Okay, so we use a process called the incident command system. This is a proven reliable method for handling vulnerabilities in a timely manner, and which is really vital for the success of Istio and the product security work group. Coordinating the effort of fixing a vulnerability is difficult. It involves a wide variety of people. You have release managers, working groups, subject matter experts. There is concerns with how messaging is conveyed to users. There's concerns with actually producing the releases. For a lot of our vulnerabilities, we produce multiple releases, and for each of those, we have the process of actually making the code changes to that release, building that release, testing that release, publishing that release, all the kind of things that you'd think would go into a normal release, but this is multiplied across all of the releases that are being fixed. So what happens when a vulnerability is reported? When a vulnerability is reported through our early disclosure mailing list, we respond to the vulnerability to the reporter within 24 hours, letting them know that we've received that report. This kicks off a process that will take up to 72 hours, through which we actually evaluate the vulnerability and decide how severe we think the vulnerability is. So when we evaluate the severity of a vulnerability, as Jacob described, we use the CVSS score to calculate how severe we think that is. Once one person calculates that, other members of the product security work group verify this, making sure that we all kind of come to the same consensus on what the score is. Depending on the score that we evaluate, a fix lead is assigned to organize the fix. So organizing the fix. In the process of organizing the fix, we have a fix lead who's responsible for finding the people who actually know the area of the code and can go and fix that vulnerability. We have the process of communicating with third parties and dependencies as necessary in order to arrange the fix of the vulnerability so everybody releases their fix at the same time. We have the process of finding a test lead to actually validate the vulnerability and the fix. And we have the process of communication, sometimes done with the communication lead, sometimes done with the fix lead to actually, yeah, we can do that. There's a question in the chat, Jacob.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it.
Okay. So we have the process of finding the communication lead who actually organizes the communication around this vulnerability. This includes emails to the early disclosure list, posting on Discuss, handling release notes for that release, all of the communication. So when it comes time to disclose that vulnerability, the Istio early disclosure list is notified of the pending release along with other details of that vulnerability. An announcement's also made notifying our users of a pending CVE patch so that they have time to go and schedule updates to their systems and be able to react when the vulnerability fix is released. Release day. So on release day, the appropriate versions have been built, qualification and performance tests have been run. All the normal stuff that might be run in a regular release has been completed. We make a post to Istio and Slack, and we disclose the CVE to the public. Once the disclosure process, or once the fix process is done, there's still work to do. We go through a post-mortem. We try to identify the patterns of the issue. We try to discuss how we can improve in the future to better handle issues. So off to you, Jacob.
Great. Thank you, Brian. So one of the main goals of this talk is to be transparent in how product security is actually handled, so that our end users feel secure. And so, given that, here are some of the things that we are currently doing. So, when a CVE is published, as Brian talked about, it's done in numerous places. It's done in advance. For instance, on Discuss, we actually post, typically 2 weeks before. And then it's also done upon release to numerous platforms. We have the central page list of vulnerabilities. Again, as I talked about earlier, we will definitely be updating it. We do solicit the community to say, what do you like about the security page? What is it that we can actually do better so that you actually feel more secure using Istio as a product? The other thing that we have is on the public drive, we actually have some public postmortems that are there. Hopefully soon we will be updating with some of the postmortems that we've done internally that we haven't published to the drive. And kind of going forward, we are going to make a stronger commitment to also being more transparent in the disclosure of having a public postmortem. And then, the last thing that we also do that I think a lot of people are not familiar with is that we actually have monthly open meetings where people can talk really about the security posture of Istio, or things that the product security is working on. Again, don't bring your vulnerability reports or something that may be sensitive to that meeting. As we'll talk about later, there's other avenues for it. But if you want to be more aware of our work, we ask that you do attend. Our next monthly meeting is actually March 3rd at 12 p.m. Eastern. So what are some of the proactive measures that we are currently doing or have done? So image vulnerability scanning was recently enabled. And so upon publication of an Istio release, packages are actually scanned using IBM Scanner. And we will update our base images accordingly, such that if people actually run a scan across them, they show hardly any issues. The one thing that I did want to call out, though, is that Istio doesn't do rolling releases, and so over time, Docker images in your scanner of choice will show, oh, this package that lives on this image is out of date or contains a vulnerability. We ask that you please just keep up to date on a regular cadence of upgrading your Istio system. That's probably the best thing that you can do as an end user to keep your service mesh secure. So what else have we done? So we actually did a third-party audit with NCC, if you're familiar with them, of Istio code. The results of this were actually reviewed during some of our open meetings, and in the near future, we intend to disclose more information about that audit. So we also have a very strong relationship with the Envoy security team. In fact, there's at least one member of the product security team that is working with the Envoy security team very closely. This is important for Istio because Envoy is a major component of our product, and 2/3 of the CVEs that were found in 2020 were actually found in Envoy or fixed in Envoy. They responsibly disclose issues with us, and at times we may have a difference of opinion on score. Given our use cases that we'll have, it's possible that we'll rate it higher or lower. But then also sometimes, if people actually do report issues to us, we will kind of triage that and reach out to the Envoy security team if it's an issue in Envoy. So this relationship has been a good model, and we actually hope and are starting to develop tighter integrations with other third-party upstream and downstream components. And this is an initiative that we hope to continue going forward. So a recent thing that we also did, and this is just kind of a shout out to John Howard for doing this. We have a blog, well, I guess an article, where the best practices for security. And so this is something that as an operator or an administrator of your service mesh, you can actually go to. And we give a list of ways to harden Istio. This is new as of February 18th. So, please take a look at it. There are kind of sound, kind of proven things that expert users as well as other vendors, strongly recommend. For instance, enabling MTLS in strict mode, using authorization policies, where possible, disabling automatic protocol detection. These are things that are great to have for a lot of users as they're starting to adopt Istio and learn about Istio. But as you become more familiar with Istio, there's just recommendations that the product security group would think that you should at least consider in your environment. So please, take a look at this document, thoroughly read it, try and understand, the contents and, the concepts that are brought out. And if you have any questions about it, please feel free to attend our open session in March. So with that, I'm going to give it back to Brian.
Thank you, Jacob. So Jacob kind of described some of the processes that we've gone through so far. What's coming in 2021? Okay, so one thing that we have right now, we have the image scanning, which kind of tells you the versions of components in your images that might have vulnerabilities. We're looking to also automate the process of scanning dependencies. So these might be versions of Go, libraries that we depend on, that sort of thing that actually get compiled into the application. After that, we'd like to consider code scanning. So through this, we can set up a set of rules that will help identify common patterns in code, which will help us prevent vulnerabilities from being inserted into the code in the first place. One example of this is validating user input before using it. And finally, we'd like to develop a threat model for Istio. The threat model will help us create a is a system that will help us create a graph of the components of Istio, the people who might perform certain activities, and what activities they should be able to perform. This will help us evaluate vulnerabilities and detect how severe they are, and also predict where future vulnerabilities might occur. Whereas the CVSS and Kubernetes scoring systems help us evaluate how severe a vulnerability is. They're not specific to Istio. Having the threat model will actually help us understand vulnerabilities better within the actual context of Istio. And Envoy already has their own model, which is linked below. So, yeah, off to you, Jacob.
Great. Yeah. Thanks again, Brian. So how can you, keep informed and stay informed of Istio security? So if you're a partner, you can join our early disclosure list. The criteria is listed below. If you meet that criteria, please join it. There, we'll just do the typical early disclosure things, where we can talk a little bit more at length, and as far as what an upcoming patch is going to fix. We do post release announcements through various means. We have RSS feeds. We have Discuss. We have Twitter. If you're on Slack, please join the announcements channel if you're not already there. And hopefully soon we'll have a Google group so that you can join an email distribution list similar to what like Golang or Kubernetes or other projects have as well, so that you can be notified via email. Now you may ask why we don't have a public Slack channel, and that's done intentionally. We don't want people to inadvertently go and say, "Hey, I think this may be an issue here," and then that would kind of raise us. That's not where we would want to be, obviously, as a product, right? Inadvertent disclosure is a very bad thing. So kind of along those lines, the security channel is actually for the security working group, and is not related to product security channel. If you or product security committee, if you have any issues like that, I'll tell you how you can actually notify us of such concerns. So a question that Brian and I want to raise and for people to answer is, where do you find information about security releases? How are you staying informed? What can we do as the product security working group to better serve you as the community? And again, how can you get involved? Our open meetings, we're really strongly pushing, more attendance on these. Again, it's coming up on March 3rd at 12 p.m. And then if you have, concerns, here's our email, istio-security-vulnerability-reports@googlegroups.com. Please don't write GitHub issues. Don't write on Slack. Don't write on Twitter. This is the appropriate way to actually disclose, a concern to us so that we can address it in the appropriate manner. So what are those concerns that you may have? So this is just kind of a short list, but here are some of the things that if you experience then you should probably reach out to us. So if you experience a crash with the control plane or the data plane, definitely contact us. If you think you've discovered a potential security vulnerability, contact us. If you're unsure how a vulnerability affects Istio, again, contact us. You think you found a vulnerability in another project or a dependency maybe that we have, contact us. And if you aren't sure, like I talked about earlier, if you aren't sure if the issue is Envoy or if it's Istio, you can contact us. We'll work through the issue and actually work with Envoy if it is Envoy, or fix it internally if it isn't. But that should not be a concern to you as an operator or an administrator of an Istio service mesh. And again, we ask that you email us, and that it's better to err on the side of caution than it is to write a GitHub issue. With that, do you have any questions? And thank you very much.